Beloved friends, today we celebrate the second Sunday of Easter, which is called the Divine Mercy Sunday. A man once carried a quiet burden for years. Outwardly, he was respected. He was a faithful Christian, generous, dependable. But inwardly, he was haunted by one past decision he had made and felt unable to forgive himself. He had confessed it many times, heard the words of absolution from the priest, but deep within him, though he believed God could have forgiven him, but he couldn't forgive himself. One Divine Mercy Sunday, he almost didn't go to Mass. Something in him resisted, perhaps pride, perhaps shame, but he went anyway. And he sat there. He felt nothing at first, just routine. Then the gospel was proclaimed. Jesus appearing to his disciples, stepping into their fear, showing them his wounds, not hiding them or erasing them, but showing them. And something broke open in him. He realized the wounds of Jesus were not signs of condemnation. Rather, they were signs of mercy. Jesus kept his wounds not to use it as a sign of the world's wickedness, but to heal. After Mass, according to him, he went quietly to confession again, this time not to repeat the same guilt, but to surrender it. When the priest raised his hand and spoke the words of absolution, something shifted. For the first time, he said he believed it and walked out not as a man pretending to be forgiven, but as a man who was forgiven. That is divine mercy. Beloved friends, divine mercy isn't just a devotion. It's a way of seeing God, seeing yourself, and seeing others. Today's celebration flows from the revelation given to St. Faustina and was strongly promoted by John Paul II. But if you strip away the institutional history, what remains is something very direct and challenging. Its source and foundation is the very nature of God, made visible through the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The account in the first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, follows directly on the story of Pentecost, where the Holy Spirit had been experienced powerfully, and it became a source of renewal for the early church. For the early Christians, everything depended on the resurrection. It was the foundation for the proclamation of the gospel. Thus, they devoted themselves to teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. They shared their lives not out of obligation, but because the resurrection reordered their priorities. In the second reading, Peter names this foundation as a new birth into a living hope, because it is not built on transformed, it is now built on transformed hearts. The famous line from the Divine Mercy image, Jesus, I trust in you, spells out the spirituality of the early church. The hidden strength of the early church was that they were held together by people who knew that they should not have been chosen, but they were still called anyway. Here we sense the powerful question that made the early church unique. What kind of God do we serve? One who keeps records or one who restores lives? The answer is given in their experience. From the experience of the early church, we understand that God's mercy is bigger than our worst moments. In other words, an encounter with the divine mercy is coming to knowledge that no sin, no failure, no past defines you more than God's love does, and no one is beyond redemption. Our gospel reading today from the Gospel of St. John chapter 20 is not just a resurrection story. Instead, it is the gospel of divine mercy in action. The disciples are locked in fear. They are not just afraid of the Jews, they also feel their guilt. Because they abandoned Jesus, Peter denied him. The others ran away. So when Jesus appears, the question is, will he condemn them? Surprisingly, he doesn't. Instead, he says, peace be with you. Here, Jesus meets their failure with mercy. Then he shows them the wounds. This is crucial. The wounds are not erased by the resurrection, just as mercy does not pretend sin didn't happen. Therefore, God's mercy does not call us to hide our wounds from God, but to let his mercy transform them. God's first response to our sin is not rejection, but reconciliation. Now, the turning point for the dispensation of God's mercy is when Jesus says to the disciples, receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you forgive are forgiven. This is massive. This implies that Jesus doesn't just show mercy, he entrusts it to the church to be the channel of God's mercy. This is the foundation of the sacrament of reconciliation. Also notice Jesus' approach to Thomas in the narrative. He doesn't criticize him. Instead, he invites him, put your finger here. Then Jesus says, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. My dear friends, we live in that blessedness. We live in that space. When we struggle with our fear and doubt, that is where Jesus meets us. In the sacrament of reconciliation, we receive mercy concretely. And in the Eucharist, we encounter mercy personally. What this means is that mercy is received personally, mediated sacramentally, and it is meant to be shared. Now, here is the good news and the challenge that comes with the divine mercy. If you really accept divine mercy, you lose the right to be harsh, the right to be bitter or unforgiving towards others. And if the door of your life are still locked by fear, guilt, or doubt, Christ is not waiting outside. He's already standing inside saying, peace be with you. And what you do with those words matters a lot. May God bless you.